Hello, ladies and gents. Hagbard Celine here on another beautiful afternoon, and today I'm going to be. Well, I changed my plan halfway through. I was going to read and respond to this little article here by one Dr. Robin DiAngelo, who is just a peach. If you have a moment, I do advise you check her out. She's lovely. That being said, I actually have decided I'm going to read this article in its entirety, almost uninterrupted aside from my little sarcastic jibes, and then the actual response at the bottom that was given in the comments section that was just too perfect to not have a little boost here. This comment deserves to be seen by more people. So, that being the case, we'll get to that, and I'll read that comment out as well. So, let us go. White fragility and the rules of engagement. You know this is going to be good. How to engage in the necessary dialogue and self-reflection that can lead to structural change. Mind you, you hear a lot about that, but she gives no solid examples whatsoever at all of systemic racism or anything even remotely like that, so it's not really well thought out or well managed in spite of the fact that this woman apparently has a PhD in this subject matter. I am white. I write and teach about what it means to be white in a society that proclaims race meaningless, yet remains deeply divided by race. A fundamental but very challenging part of my work is moving white people from an individual understanding of racism, i.e. the good understanding of racism, oh no wait, she means, i.e. only some people are racist and those people are bad, which is something we should probably continue to reinforce, to a structural understanding. A structural understanding recognizes racism as a default system that institutionalizes an unequal distribution of resources and power between white people and people of color. I'm not sure how you would have equal distribution of power for 13% of the population, but do go on. This system is historic, taken for granted, deeply embedded, and it works to the benefit of whites. Okay, that's a lot of statements, not a whole lot of evidence. The two most effective beliefs that prevent us, whites, please don't group me in with you, I have nothing to do with you, from seeing racism as a system are that racists are bad people, okay, and racism is a conscious dislike. Alright, well we would tend to do that because otherwise we are attempting to mind read people, which I think is perhaps dangerous. If we are well intentioned and do not consciously dislike people of color, we cannot be racist. This is why it is so common for white people to cite their friends and family members as evidence for their lack of racism. However, when you understand racism as a system of structured relations into which we are all socialized, you understand that intentions are irrelevant. And when you understand how socialization works, you understand that much of racial bias is unconscious. Negative messages about people of color circulate all around us. While having friends of color is better than not having them, it doesn't change the overall system or prevent racism from surfacing in our relationships. The societal default is white supremacy, and we are fed a steady diet of it 24/7. To not actively seek to interrupt racism is to internalize and accept it. Again, you are accusing an entire race of people in this article. You ignore that, you don't like that fact, but that's exactly what you're doing. As part of my work, I teach, lead, and participate. The fact that you do any of those things is frightening. In affinity groups, facilitate workshops, and mentor other whites on recognizing and interrupting racism in our lives. Shouldn't you be giving this position up to a person of color? That feels right to me. You're a white woman. You shouldn't be doing this. As a facilitator, I am in a position to give white people feedback on how their unintentional racism is manifesting. This has allowed me to repeatedly observe several social patterns of response. The most common so far is outrage. How dare you suggest that I have said or done something racist? No, I'm never concerned about that. As a matter of fact, at this point in my YouTubing, I kind of consider it a badge of honor when someone finally comes up and goes, hey, that's racist. It's like, no, I'm trolling you and having a lot of fun doing it. Given the dominant conceptualization of racism as individual acts of cruelty, it follows that only terrible people who don't like people of color can commit it. While this conceptualization is misinformed, well, only by your perspective of having spent 8 years of your life reading about racism in a sociological context, which doesn't have application in real life almost ever, by the way. It functions beautifully to protect racism by making it impossible to engage in the necessary dialogue and self-reflection that can lead it to change. Outrage is often followed by righteous indignation. Well, if it's righteous indignation, then that means that they're right. You know that, right? You wrote this article. You know that righteous indignation is inherently righteous, right? Okay. About the manner in which the feedback was given. I have discovered, as I am sure have countless people of color, that there is apparently an unspoken set of rules for how to give white people feedback on racism. No, this is another issue that I have with a lot of these social practices. What they're saying is, people of color can just assault white people about racism, and white people should just accept that. We should just be like, yeah, it's understandable, I understand. The court system actually had a system in place for that. They would actually call incidences of black people getting angry at racial slurs and things understandable black rage. Of course, eventually a lot of black people found that uncomfortable and decided it probably wasn't something they wanted perpetuated by the court system. After years of working with my fellow whites, I have found that the only way to give feedback correctly is to not give it at all. Thus is the first cardinal rule. Do not give me feedback on my racism under any circumstances. Okay, that's a bit of a straw man you're stuffing, but fine, fair enough. 2. Proper tone is crucial. Feedback must be given calmly. Yeah, again, this is you saying it's just acceptable that if someone could run up and start screaming, "You motherfucking racist!" Yeah, no, I'm not dealing with that. Especially not for microaggressions, which is really what you're talking about in this. If there is any emotion in the feedback is invalid and does not have to be considered. Yeah, I tend to ignore emotionally upset people and their reasoning because they're usually wrong. There must be trust between us. This is inherent with any communication. You must trust that I am in no way racist before you give me feedback on my racism. You see the inherent trap in this? This is already set up. There's nothing that a white person can do or say in a situation like this that you don't perceive as racism. This is all you see. Our relationship must be issue-free. If there have been issues, if there are issues between us, you cannot give me feedback on racism. Oh my god, of course, if I don't like you or trust you, I'm not going to listen to you. Get used to it. That's just how human beings interact. You'd think you'd know that as a sociologist, huh? Feedback must be given immediately, otherwise it will be discounted because it was not given sooner. Again, it's kind of like the rape thing. If you say I raped you and then you continued to go out with me for like 2 years, it's kind of like the rape thing. If you say a man raped you and then we say, well, you continued to date him for like 2 years and you still communicate today, but you want us to take the accusation of rape super seriously, it is kind of on you to report this incident. You must give feedback privately, regardless of whether the incident occurred in front of other people. To give feedback in front of anyone else, even those involved in the situation, is to commit a serious social transgression. Thus, feedback is invalid. Yeah, indeed, if you make a public scene of it for the sole purpose of shaming someone publicly, they're not going to react well to it. What do you expect? You must be as indirect as possible. To be direct is to be insensitive, and it will invalidate the feedback and require repair. As a white person, I must feel completely safe during any discussion of race. It's ironic you should say that, because people get assaulted for saying things that are perceived as racist all the time. So yeah, it does kind of help when you're not punching the person in the face. I understand that in this you actually do mean comfortable, I have already read this, but the way that you put it here is kind of funny. Giving me any feedback on my racism will cause me to feel unsafe. So, you will need to rebuild my trust by never giving me feedback again. Point of clarification, when I say safe, what I really mean is comfortable. This woman has led an extremely comfortable life. It actually makes me want to reach through the screen and smack her across the face a couple times, just to let her know it can happen randomly. Most people have experienced things like that. You haven't because you live an extremely comfortable life. Giving me feedback on my racial privilege invalidates the form of oppression that I experience. Yes, we all know that the oppression Olympics is getting old. You must focus on my intentions, which cancel the impact of my behavior. Yeah, well, if I didn't intend anything, then my behavior is not, that this is part of the legal system even. Jesus. To suggest my behavior had a racist impact is to have misunderstood me. This could actually just be true. You will need to allow me to explain until you acknowledge that it was your misunderstanding. These rules are rooted in white fragility. Again, you can't say that reacting to the word nigger is black fragility because it's valid somehow, but the feelings of whites are invalid because they shouldn't have an emotional response. Just as you're allowing people of color to have, they're completely allowed, if not encouraged, to have an emotional response. But white emotional response is bad because we're just supposed to have it more together. Their contradictions are irrelevant. Their function is to obscure racism and protect white dominance, and they do so very effectively. Yet, from an understanding of racism as a system of unequal institutional power, we need to ask ourselves where these rules come from and who they serve. Yes, that would be good to ask yourself. Many of us actively working to interrupt racism continually hear complaints about the gotcha culture of white anti-racism. There is a stereotype, and it exists for a reason, that we are looking for every incident we can find, so we can spring out, point our fingers, and shout, "You're a racist." This stereotype was not formed in a void. While certainly there are white people who arrogantly set themselves apart from other whites, what you're doing right now, by acting in this way, in my experience over 20 years, this is not the norm. It is far more common for sincere white people to agonize over when and how to give feedback to a fellow white person. Again, you're a waspy old white woman who didn't grow up in this new culture that you have helped to create. This is the culture you have built you are crying about, bitch. White fragility works to punish the person giving feedback and essentially bully them back into silence. It also maintains white solidarity, the tacit agreement that we will protect white privilege and not hold each other accountable for our racism. When the person giving the feedback is a person of color, the charge is playing the race card, and the consequence of white fragility are much more penalizing. No, nobody's penalized. We just laugh at people that are clearly pulling the race card. This is a thing that people can do. Racism is the norm rather than an aberration. Feedback is key to our ability to recognize and repair our inevitable and often unaware collusion. Yeah, there is a subconscious psychic conspiracy that white people are in. This is a healthy thing to understand. In recognition of this, I follow these guidelines. How, where, and when you give me feedback is irrelevant. It is the feedback I want and need. So you're a masochist. You actually enjoy this. Understanding that it is hard to give, I will take it in any way I can get. From my position of social, cultural, and institutional white power and privilege, something that you personally have, not white people in general, I am perfectly safe and I can handle it. If I cannot handle it, it's on me to build up my racial stamina. Oh, so we should just get used to this, is what you're saying. Alright, fair enough. Thank you. Yeah, we get it. You're the female version of a cuck. We understand. The above guidelines rest on the understanding that there is no face to save and the jig is up. I know that I have blind spots and unconscious investments in white superiority. My investments are reinforced every day in mainstream society. I did not set this system up, but it does unfairly benefit me and I am responsible for interrupting it. I need to work hard to recognize it myself, but I can't do it alone. This understanding leads me to gratitude when others help me. Oh my god, so seriously, the fact that you are a racist is the problem here. The fact that you did unfairly benefit in society. You should not be in a position of power. You don't deserve what you have, and you know it. Somewhere deep down inside, you know it, and that's where your guilt comes from. In my workshop, I often ask people of color, how often have you given white people feedback on our unaware yet inevitable racism and had it go well for you? Eye-rolling, head-shaking, and outright laughter follow, along with the general consensus of never. I then ask, what would it be like if you could simply give us feedback, have us graciously receive it, reflect, and work to change this behavior? Recently, a man of color sighed and said, it would be revolutionary. I ask my fellow whites to consider the profundity of that response. Revolutionary. That we would receive, reflect, and work to change the behavior. On one hand, it points out how difficult and fragile we are. On the other hand, how simple taking responsibility for our racism can be. I understand that you feel the need to take responsibility for the racism you actually have. However, that being said, why is it that you don't expect the same of black people? Can I not criticize the black community as a whole? No, that's racist, sorry. Now to the comment, which is really why I decided to do this one. Robin, I think your heart is in the right place, but ultimately your approach to this situation only serves to widen the gap between races by coming off as accusatory and patronizing. It even has preemptive clauses built into it so that you can quickly and easily label people who disagree with you. Here are the key problems to what you're trying to push here. 1. People are always going to refer to their own life experiences before considering the quote-unquote bigger picture. Yes, white privilege is real, more on that subject later, but when you tell a white homeless man that he has enjoyed white privilege, what exactly is his reaction supposed to be? If you accuse a person of anything, yes, they're generally going to react poorly to it. This is universal across all races, genders, and creeds. Your goal here feels less like you're trying to educate people about how to not be racist, and more like you're trying to elicit the desired reaction so you can then say, there, you see how racist you are? You're so racist that you won't even have a conversation about it. Of course your average person isn't going to consider the bigger picture first. In fact, the odds are that they'll read this article, look at their own miserable excuse for a life, and decide that you and everyone like you is completely out of touch with reality. Because they are. You simply cannot tell people to accept that they need to atone for a sin they certainly don't seem to have committed, i.e. benefiting from white privilege when they live in poverty, and expect the discussion to continue after that. And no, these people are not lost racist causes who are beyond being brought to the side of reason, as I'll also explain later. You ask white people to immediately take a submissive stance on the subject without knowing anything about the circumstances involved. Ironically, you yourself wind up being racist by approaching the situation with the assumption that all people of color are as innocent and naive as the Na'vi creatures from Avatar. I have bad news for you. Seeing people as equal regardless of skin color means acknowledging that anyone can be as downright calculating, conniving, and underhanded as the most evil white people in history has ever seen. When you tell white people to immediately assume the submissive stance on this matter, you possibly are setting them up for a very rude awakening, one that is going to negatively affect their perceptions of people of color. There are people out there just waiting to take advantage of white guilt for personal gain. People who don't give a rat's butt about how negative this white person's feelings are going to be towards that race from then on, just as racist white people are very careful about how their actions will reflect the future perceptions of their victims. Painting everyone of a certain race with the same brush is racism, even if that brush is meant to be a positive one. You complicate something that may in fact be incredibly simple. Racism will finally be dead when people treat each other the same regardless of skin color. Contrary to the web of confusion, guilt, and misconceptions you seem to weave here with the rules governing the interaction between white people and non-whites, it's really not that complicated. If you like someone, be their friend. If you're romantically interested in them, ask them out. The first step to eradicating racism is to do so on a personal level. Then let people interact with each other as they interact with anyone of their skin tone, without clouding it up with a bunch of bizarre rules, caveats, and cautions. When you add a lot of what can be called extra work into having any kind of relationship with a person who's not the same skin tone as you, you're essentially encouraging people to avoid these relationships to start with. And that goes for everyone involved. It's difficult to be someone's friend when they walk on eggshells around you all the time because they're afraid of offending you. Friends are people who let it all hang out when they're around each other. If you value a person as a human being, they know full well that you're not going to say anything to deliberately hurt them. We are all suffering together, bound by the same noose around the necks of white, black, Asian, Latino, etc. White privilege exists, most definitely. It's a real thing that most white people have been knowingly or unknowingly benefiting from their whole lives. However, white privilege is only a symptom of a much bigger issue. Ask yourself this: why does white privilege exist? Because white people started this country, and white people are still predominantly the ones running it. The people with most of the money and power in this country are white, plain and simple. These rich, white, powerful white people are just as oppressive to the vast majority of the white people as they are towards any non-white person. In fact, unless your net worth is over $1 billion, you probably don't even see you as relevant, no matter your skin color. Of course, they have many white people convinced that they're not, and getting those white people to see this fact is a real challenge. So, rather than sit white people down and tell them how much privilege they've enjoyed in order to be living in a trailer on welfare, point out that the reason that they're living in a trailer on welfare is the same reason many people of color also have it rough. Keyword being also. We're all in the same boat of suffering, period, end. See, your entire argument basically boils down to two men chained to a wall, where the second man tells the first how lucky he is that the first man's neck clamp is slightly looser than that of the second man. While technically true, it's not exactly an argument that's going to sway the first man. Instead, both men should be working on an escape plan together, which in real-life terms involves people of all races, genders, and creeds working together against a system that relies on things like racial division to prevent people from seeing the true bigger picture, and who is actually responsible for the oppression that they feel. Again, I think you want to do the right thing, but nothing you've put forth here is going to change any of the minds that need changing, and yes, they can be changed if you go about it the right way. That's a pretty solid comment. We could have a discussion about Chinese privilege in China as well, but I understand what they're saying about white privilege, and I've acknowledged that from the very beginning. White privilege exists insofar as majority privilege exists. That's all. Thanks for joining me today, ladies and gents. I hope you've enjoyed this little back and forth. Good luck, stay safe, and goodbye.